Well, when we're talking about marriage, there's a lot of people who are saying, well, I'm not married. How is this going to be related to me? Well, one day you might be married, and then it will be completely related to you. But then there's other people who are saying, well, I've been married, and it hasn't quite worked out as we had planned. And so in a room like this, we're going to have a variety of different experiences, different challenges, and hopefully by the end of it, there'll be something, a little tip, a little advice, something that you can go, actually, I could put that into practice. Because we can all do with a little bit of work. Although that Kate and I have been married for 27 years, and I'm very proud of that, because the average length of marriage in Australia today is 12 and a half years. It's gone up. It used to be 10 and a half in the year 2000. So we actually are getting better at staying together. But unfortunately, 12 and a half years is not really till death do us part. And what we would like to do and share with you today is share a little bit of advice, maybe things that you've heard before, maybe some things that you've go, well, that's I know that, but how many times we have the knowing-doing gap? We know what to do, and then we don't do it. And hopefully, as I said, we're going to share some of our experiences. We're pretty transparent. Kate is an excellent, excellent wife.
Thanks, hon.
She can pay me later. And but she's an amazing mother, and we have a wonderful, wonderful family, and we're very proud of that. And not to say that we've got it all together. We make our mistakes, and we will probably share some of our mistakes as we go along. But hopefully, as I said, there'll be something that you'll go away and you go, actually, I can apply that into my everyday world. Now, I did say this is our family, and for those who hadn't seen it, we've got 3 sons, a 23-year-old, a 20-year-old, and an 18-year-old, and they're having a wonderful time without us, except they did complain that we're away from them because we've done a family tradition. We always do an Easter egg hunt, and they are very disappointed that we're away because they're going to say, who's going to hide the eggs?
We had to leave it to our eldest. We gave him the bag. It's hilarious. I mean, they're older, but our youngest one loves tradition. The oldest 2 could live without it. It's tradition. This is what we do. We've always done it. So they've actually roped friends in, and the girlfriend and the friend and another friend, they're coming over, and because they've never done an Easter egg hunt. So they're going to do an adult Easter egg hunt. So Brett went out and bought the rabbits, and they're being hidden by our eldest, so the adults can go on an adult Easter hunt on Sunday morning.
Kate used to hide them, forget where she hid them, and would find them about 2 or 3 years later.
And we had to actually start putting their initials on the eggs because our youngest he's a hunter. So he would find everyone else's eggs and we would say, that's not yours, put it back. And so I'd say, don't tell anyone, So we went to the letters and they had to put them back if they found them.
We had to do that, things like getting warmer, hot, cold, Anyway, you get the picture. But that's what we're missing out on, doing those type of things. And hopefully you have some traditions as well. But we're going to be speaking about marriage. And as I said, there'll be people who have been married in the past or married right now. And if you are sitting next to your partner of life and there's something that resonates within you, give a little hand squeeze. Say, yeah, you're doing really, really well. All right? Then if you're sitting next to someone that you don't like, and then, no, I'm only joking. But if you say something, you say, you could do a little bit better, don't do that because you get bruised ribs, and that's not really, really appropriate. But we are so different. Males and females are so different. Does anyone recognise that? Yeah. In fact, I saw this picture and I thought it was quite appropriate how men see themselves when they look in the mirror as opposed to women. And I remember I actually had lost about 10 kilograms in weight, and you start laughing. Why are you laughing? And see, after I lost the 10 kilograms weight, I still look the same.
Oh, sorry. You look good.
No, she doesn't. I've been going to the gym about 3 or 4 times a week, and I said to her, am I looking, good? Yes, she says. Not convincing. And I said, underneath this layer of fat is very, very good six-pack, I said to her. She goes, oh, yes. And I'm not really convinced. But we've also had this, men has tried to study the difference between men and women. And there's a book coming out this Christmas, and I've got the prototype, And it looks a bit like this, Understanding Women. Unfortunately, it's already out of date before it hit the stands. But I will show you this little quick video, and hopefully it works with everything working at the moment. Stephen is going really well. And it's the difference between men and women, how men tend to like to fix things. So if you've seen it before, I'm sure you'll appreciate it.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless, and I don't know if it's gonna stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever gonna stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't.
Can anyone relate to that? Just, have you had a nail in your head, have you? And your husband tried to fix it. We're just so different. But yet that's the beauty of our differences, that we actually can work ideally in complementing each other. And hopefully as we share today, there'll be some things that you'll resonate with, other things that will say, well, that's not applicable to me. But by the end of it, there may be one or two things. Kate and I have had a wonderful start to our marriage because God has always been in the centre, and a scripture that we've actually been very close to our heart has been two are better than one, because there has been a good return on your work. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken, and God has been the centre of our relationship. In fact, I googled rope making, and actually it says that when there's 3 strands, it is so much stronger than just 2, or if not 1. But if you add a 4th or a 5th, it doesn't make it any stronger. It actually weakens it. By having 3, it actually is the best way to be the strongest your rope can be. But when we put God in the mix, God has been in the centre of our marriage. And even before we got married, do you want to share just a little bit about when we were thinking about getting married?
Our pre-marriage. Before we even got engaged, we decided that we wanted to make sure that we were walking the same way. We didn't want to end up in marriage. We both had visions for our lives, and we just wanted to make sure we were headed in the same direction. So we'd heard about Elkanah in Marysville in Victoria, and we decided to go up. They did pre-marriage, but we did pre-engagement. And they talked about all the things that need to be covered, you know, or family of origin, communication, sex, finances, you name it, everything. And it was for the weekend. And it was interesting because right back then, we actually had a prophetic word over us that we would be working in family ministry in the future. And when that happened, the two of us actually looked at each other and went, is that a calling that you have on your life? And the two of us had both said that's exactly what we had seen in our lives for the future. And so it was a very exciting thing to be setting out on a path before we even got engaged, that we knew that we were both headed the same way. Even though we'd come from 2 very different families, both Christian, sets of Christian parents, but 2 very different experiences. So, you know, we had to talk through all of those kinds of things, but it was very much a a God-directed relationship from that moment. I mean, from the moment we started, but from that moment on, we made the decision that we were going to walk this path together and the direction that God was taking us.
So fast forward 25 years from that time, well actually 27 years, and then now we're doing what that prophecy took. So sometimes things take a little bit of time. One of the things that we've found that was really good to talk to our kids about is our past, our stories, our mistakes, our good things. And Kate's got a lot of mistakes, apparently, according to my sons. They discovered her diary when she was her teenage diary.
One of them.
And they only read it for about 10 minutes, but there was a lot of juicy stuff. And they said, you don't have to give us any more gifts ever again, except giving us access to the diaries.
So there is a promise that when my second son gets married, he gets them when he gets back from his honeymoon.
For a wedding gift.
As a wedding gift. Yeah, it's become a family thing. They go, could we just do it earlier? And it's just because I get a lot of bagging. Being in a house of boys, I am a fodder for a lot of bagging, and it's very, very funny. But it's good.
So one of the things that we try and share is, because sometimes reflecting back, it actually strengthens the future. And it's good to reflect on sometimes the hard things, the difficult things. And so we talk about our first kiss, we talk about with our first date, we talk about when we started, when we first got married, and it's sometimes just some great memories. We're sharing at the lunchtime today, talking about when we first got married. I mean, we didn't have all the big screen TVs and all the furniture. We had 2 bar fridges, one white, one brown, and they sat on each other. That's what we had. And we had a card table as our dining room table. And every time you knocked it, it just spilt everywhere. And, but great memories. And our boys want to have that as well. And I actually think, today sometime, if you're with your partner and just reflect upon some of the good stories. And we reflect upon those things because, as we mentioned before about the traditions, we have wonderful traditions. And we've had fortunate to be taking our boys to Europe, and we've taken our boys to America. And I said to them, what's your best and what's your most favourite holiday destination? And they said, Phillip Island.
We could have saved a lot of money.
We could have saved a lot of money, And I said, why Phillip Island? They said, because it had a table tennis table and we went out for ice cream every night. And that was the traditions. They love the idea of being together. But being together in the family is really important, but being together between you and your spouse is even more important, because I get to hear a lot of heartbreaking stories. We get a lot of phone calls and emails from people all over Australia seeking advice, seeking counsel, seeking someone to listen to them where they've drifted apart. And whether they're empty nesters, sometimes they've had so much energy put into the kids that they've actually drifted apart. And I like to think that we should be really intentional in bringing your relationship to how God wants us to be. And so we're going to share some tips, not so much biblical references, but simple advice and simple tips that we can apply to our everyday world. And by the end of it, hopefully that you'll be able to keep the spark alive. We're going to go through a few of these things: building intentionally, value and respect, persevering courageously, guarding vigilantly, serving humbly, and then intimacy and sex, which all the men lean forward on that one, I tend to find, and then just enjoying and having fun.
And forgiving.
And one of the things that we've found, there's some themes of why marriages aren't successful. And there's lots of people have theorised about what these are. But here are 3 things that have become very evident. That the reason why there are problems. One is just simply laziness. No effort, no energy, no intentionality. They're just lazy. Communication, which is obviously a very important thing, and we'll talk about that in a little while. But having expectations, sometimes people's expectations that it's all going to be rosy and everything's lovely and, we love each other and it's going to be wonderful. And then they get married and they have their first conflict and they have their first challenge, their first what I call intense fellowship. And then it actually creates some expectations that were not met. And sometimes those expectations, like you're going to say, when I got married, I was going to change my husband to just the way I wanted him to be. And he wasn't willing to change. Surprise, surprise. And that's the reason why premarital counselling, as Kate was mentioning, is such an important part, and we highly recommend it. So we're going to talk a little bit about building the relationship. And one of the most important things we've found is you have to become a student of your spouse. Study them. What makes them tick? What they enjoy? what makes them alive? What are they passionate about? And one of the things that I found in our relationship, that some things that Kate was passionate about in years ago have changed. We adapt. We sort of change over the years. Some things, she was highly involved in sport, and then that's not a big issue, but she still loves sport, but it's not her sort of her demigod. It wasn't, sport was a very big thing, part of her world. And she might share a little bit about that later on, about how, God interrupted that and took away sport when she was involved in a car accident. But one of the things that I can say about Kate is that she has a primary language of love. And you probably heard this, and there might be a book up the back by Gary Chapman about the 5 languages of love. We tend to have a primary language of love. And for Kate, I know her primary language of love is time. I can just give her time and be present, not just physically present, but emotionally and relationally present. Because how many people know that you can actually be there, but your head's a long, long way away?
Yeah, look, I think this is one of the biggest issues in marriage, to be quite honest, because we have our own language of love. We think that the other person's is going to be the same, so we give out of that, and when it's not reaching them, we go, why can't we reach them? And it's because we're acting out of what our language of love is, not what their language of love is. So for Brett, his is encouraging words and touch. And so it's really important that we understand that if I just spend a lot of time with him, as much as he'd enjoy that, if I'm not encouraging him and holding his hand or, playing with his hair or whatever, he'll start to purr, then I'm just acting out of what feeds my, fuels my fire. And so it doesn't fuel his. And so he can then not feel, loved up. And so we need to really work out what it is the other person's language is. How do they hear love? How do they feel it? And it won't always be the same. And it does change. It does change over time. So you need to be always looking out for what it is that makes them tick. You can ask them. If you don't know, ask them.
Or better still, you can do this as homework tonight.
Yes.
And ask and see if you get it right. I think your language of love is this. And they'll go, oh, you have no idea who I am.
Wrong.
Or alternatively, you could actually say, yeah, that's right.
And you might have 2 or 3 that are very important. It was interesting because I listened to this preacher speak, a young preacher, and when he was growing up, he was in a single-parent home, mum and sisters, and their language of love was all gifts. And so easy, he goes, easy. Just buy them gifts, you got it set. So then he got married and he was out playing golf with a mate, and he comes home and he thinks all's going to be fine because, he's out with a mate, he's been out for dinner with the mate, he comes home to the wife and she's not all that chuffed. And it turns out that his wife's language of love is not gifts. And he got ripped off because his best mate's wife's language of love is gifts. So he goes, how did I get a wife where her love language is time? He said, I knew how to do gifts, I don't know how to do time. So he said, now I have to work on it. And he said that was really tough for him because he said, if that's not my language, how is it hers? And so he said he really had to make the time and invest that, because that is the way he then realised that she became softened to him, because he was investing in her way, and she invested for him his way.
So for those who are unfamiliar with the 5 languages of love, I'll just give you a brief thing. Words of affirmation is one. Gifts, and a lot of kids like gifts, but most kids also like time, and our spouses like time. Acts of service, because I was a nurse and then a pastor, acts of service is a very big part of who I am and what I do. I like to do things for it, and I like to do things for my family, and I'll go out of my way, almost sometimes to my own detriment, because I want to show my love. But then my family keep on having to remind me that I don't need to keep on doing those things, and particularly Kate doesn't want me to do things for her all the time. And even though I'm thinking, well, I'm showing you how I love you, sweetheart. And she goes, I'd rather you just be here with me, not doing stuff for me. And we also know that physical touch, and particularly for men, physical touch is a very big part of our language of love, our primary language of love. But even though sometimes there's, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, that sometimes sexual intimacy is not always there. And so we have to find other ways to express that love. And when, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But we've found the simple act of touching and holding hands. And each one of you has probably got a unique way of holding each other's hands that is unique to you. And for those golfers, we have an interlocking holding hand. It's very good, very secure, and you do less slices when we hold each other's hand.
And it was very funny, actually, the other night, the boys, you know, because we talk about everything. So we've talked about how we met, our romance, etc., etc. They know everything. And we've always said that holding hands is so intimate. And one of our sons, he liked this girl a while back, and he got to hold her hand, and he came home and he went, "Oh, holding hands is good." And he goes, "You're right, it is so lovely." He goes, "It was just the most romantic thing. It was just so sweet." But the other night we were around the table, and we've got a girl who's almost a daughter, in the fact that she's been coming to our house for 5 years and has never left. She comes every Sunday. She's not a Christian. She's just part of our family. And they said, "How do you hold hands?" And so we showed them how we hold it. "Oh, that's odd." And so they all went around the table holding hands and going, "Oh, that's weird. What about that? What if we interlock? What if we do this? What if we do..." I'm like, this is a whole discussion on holding hands. So they go, "You know, it's not that bad. We quite like that idea. We'll give that a go." So, you know, they're trying with this girl and trying with each other, and oh, it was very funny. There's a lot of laughter in our house.
And it seems to be just a small thing, but those little small things add up. If you've been using a sport vernacular, we talk about the 1%ers, the extra mile, and sometimes those little things can actually open up someone's heart and mind. And then obviously the final and the fifth one is time. But you have to love on purpose, love intentionally. You don't just, it doesn't just open up, you don't just suddenly go into love mode. Sometimes you actually have to really work at it. And we've found that by loving on purpose, loving intentionally, and finding the language that your spouse desires or needs, and filling that actually opens up the spirit and does keep the spark alive. We're going to talk about a little bit about communication. One of the things that, particularly for guys, we're not too bright, all right? I'm speaking on all men, not all men, but me particularly. We're not always, oh, goodness me. We don't like games. We'd like to be, just simply tell us what it is. We don't have to read between the lines. Because women can sort of be more subtle, and they don't really explain what you really want to think. And so that's very confusing for men to actually understand what's going on in this brain of theirs. And I think sometimes women don't understand what's going on in their brains as well. But one of the things that we've found is, if Kate wants to clearly communicate with me, she just needs to spell it out. No subtlety, no games. And Kate's got a story about my sister-in-law.
Yeah, look, I'm actually not a typical woman. I hate to say that. But I am a no-game player. All my friends were male. I worked in a male-dominated department, and I have all boys in my house. I am very much a no-game playing person, so it was quite easy to be direct for me. But having worked with girls and women, there's a lot to be said for the silent treatment and game playing, and it's a no-go zone. Silent treatment is a killer of marriages, an absolute killer. Punishing. It's not a good thing to do. In terms of the sister-in-law, her husband has forgotten her birthday every year. And she was really upset again. And so I said to her, instead of trying to be subtle or just being hurt every single year, I said, you need to start putting things on the fridge. It's my birthday in 5 days. Maybe we should go out for dinner. Maybe you could plan something. A gift would be nice. I said, this is direct, no more game playing and no more predicting that in 3 days' time you are going to be hurt. Forget the hurt stage, that's been and done, okay? He's not going to remember. Put it in his phone, flash it up, but make some fun out of it. He's not going to remember, so now you've got to make some fun out of it, because deciding to be hurt around your birthday every year is really not the way to go. So you've either got the choice to be miserable and angry or have some fun with it. And so it's really best to not game play. I think one of the biggest destroyers of joy in your home is game playing, second guessing and silent treatment. Communication is one of the biggest things to get right so that you're not living in offence all the time. Fact number one, you're going to get offended. It's two people living under the same roof. You have joined as one, but you're still two people. You are not going to agree on everything, and chances are you're going to disagree on a lot of things. So just really important that we
And we're going to be talking
remember
about
to
conflict
respect.
resolution in one of our sessions a bit later on, about how to resolve conflict in a really healthy way. But this idea of, being subtle doesn't necessarily work for guys. And we've found, and it's interesting, sort of, I don't know if you've heard of a guy named Mark Gungor, and he has a Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage. And sometimes we men are very gifted in the ability that we have a nothing box in our brains. We just sometimes, when our wives ask us, what are you thinking about? We can genuinely answer this, nothing. Now, for a woman, that is just uncharted territory, because they've got boxes everywhere in their brains and they're all interconnected with wires. But we have the ability to think nothing, literally. But it's interesting that sometimes when Kate says, how are you? And because our spouse knows us, and we might say, I'm fine, and she'll say, no, there's something on. And then she'll dig a little deeper. Sometimes it is just, I'm fine, but sometimes we actually have to share what's going on in our minds. Now, I might be a theorist when it comes to that. I don't always share everything what's on my mind, but intuitively she knows when something's up. So be clear with our communication. But one of the things about communication, one of the things that I've found, there is 4 things you'll never hear your man say. All right, here are 4 things. One is, can we just cuddle up tonight and just talk? You won't hear a man saying that very often, all right? Another thing that men will say, if I took Friday off, can we go shopping and make a weekend of it? You won't hear a man saying that. Or alternatively, you won't hear a man saying this. If there is any way we can get your mum to stay a week longer after she's been there for a month, you won't get a man saying this. And finally, this is what you won't hear a man say. Of course I'll go with you to the ballet. I love seeing men in tights. There are some things communication won't break, things like this. So one of the things that we've found in, when you've been married for a long time is you have a tendency, maybe consciously, but sometimes most obviously, subconsciously, you can take each other for granted and just expect people to do things, and especially your spouse. And we've found that we have to be very intentional, showing value and respect. And every now and then, my wife, when I'm going out somewhere or something like that, she'll just say, I'm so proud of you. Thank you for going out and doing what you do. Thank you so much for providing a roof over our heads. Thank you for working so hard for our boys. And thank you for being a good father or a big role model. And that just fills me, just fills my tank. And it doesn't have to be all the time, because we shouldn't actually keep on blowing each other's tyres up for the sake of it. But those things, just showing value and respect. And I'll do the same thing for Kate, just to, she's a wonderful mother and a wonderful wife. And for me to not acknowledge that or to show appreciation of that is actually saying, I'm not really caring for you, and showing that appreciation. So keeping the spark alive, one of those important things is to show appreciation and to acknowledge that.
Yeah, look, appreciation, even saying thank you. Thank you for the meal. Thank you for... my boys, because they've got this unbelievable role model.
Thank you very much.
They thank me for doing the folding. They thank me for when I've done the ironing and put it in their cupboard, even though they all can iron, they can all fold and wash, so they do it on occasion themselves. But when I do it, they do thank me. And, you know, it's to show appreciation and respect is really important, because it's not just a given. You don't have to do it. You do it because you love them. And so they then learn how to respect that. And it's really important that we remember that our children are watching. They remember 10% of what we say and 90% of what we do. So when we treat each other with respect, they pick up on that and they follow suit. And if they don't, they're pulled into line fairly quick.
One of the things that we've found is really important is this idea of listening to each other's point of view, really actively listening to what they have to say, what is important to them, and valuing their input, valuing their opinion. Sometimes we can actually just, you know, we can think that we know the right answer and we don't include our spouse. And Kate is excellent with finances, so I've allowed her to do the finances. I could do them, but she can do those things because she's gifted in that way. I value her opinion. I value what she can contribute to our household, our relationship. And I have to say, she has picked up cues and she's wise, and she can pick up different things, that intuition type of thing. So men, we need to listen to our spouses because they've got so much wisdom and intuition that we may not necessarily pick up because of maybe the subtlety, maybe the game played, but we should really value our wife's opinions. And that actually shows that value and respect, which is so important and often, unfortunately, is so missing in this generation, because we can take each other for granted. And that is a danger. Don't go there if you start taking one another for granted. One of the things, and we'll share a little bit about our journey, is occasionally life doesn't go as you would like. When we first got married, it was lovely. We were enjoying, you know, everything together, and, you know, going out and starting life together. And it was just lovely. And we were just the two of us, and then we include other couples, and, you know, it was just lovely. And then tragedy struck. And my wife was involved in a car accident, and she was bedbound for about 18 months. And so when you've got, you know, when you're starting out in marriage, you know, it's the honeymoon period, you know, it's going to be lots of sex, there's going to be lots of things, you know, that's what I read, you know. I think I might have written those articles, but you know. And then that suddenly is stopped. But also the fact is those expectations as well, because we've found that, you know, when you're brought up in one household and you have an expectation and someone else has another expectation, and you put together and your tribe and their tribe, and then sometimes it can be tribal warfare. And those ideas, those expectations, and because of Kate's background of some dysfunctional aspects in her family, then there was aspects of her giving herself fully to me, physically and emotionally and relationally, was because of her upbringing, and she'll share that in a moment. But we've found that, you know, sickness and injuries can, you know, interject or inject some hurdles in your relationship, and that's where we see so many families or relationships breaking up because of those hurdles. And that's why we need to have that solid foundation. And for us, our solid foundation has been that third strand in our life for God, and also then our friendship, more than the romance. Do you want to go on a little bit more? Yeah,
look, very tough when we'd only been married 2 years, and I was involved in this car accident, and it went from being a romance to a friendship. And this is part of marriage. You are going to have ebbs and flows when you have children, when you have sickness. It's part of that whole vow thing, in sickness and in health, for richer, for poorer.
We had a lot of poorer.
And that whole vow thing right now is so many people actually don't say those vows anymore. And instead of it being a covenant, it becomes a contract. And it was interesting because I was speaking to a friend the other day, and he said, I kept writing in the word covenant, and it kept being self-corrected to convenient. And he said, I couldn't believe it, because he was writing about a covenant and it kept re-correcting it, self-correcting to convenience. And he said that's what marriage has become, a convenience until it's uncomfortable. And so with our marriage, we had to change it up, and little things had to become very important to keep it romantic and, you know, a really close friendship. So little things like notes and holding hands and just sitting and talking to each other and saying lovely words to each other. He used to hide, we were given these bears, and I had a polar bear from Canada, and he had been given another bear, and so he used to hide these bears around the house, and the bears would have these conversations. So I would find one bear, you know, hidden on top of something with this big thought bubble, doing something mean to my bear. And so I would find them all around the house till one day I found my bear on top of a lamp, and I think his bear was saying, "Take that," or something. And the lamp had actually burnt its stomach. And it was so little fun, silly things to keep love alive. That was silly, like it was silly, but there was no other silly we could do. I couldn't go anywhere, we couldn't muck around outside, you know, it was nothing else we could do. So for us, it was very important that we found ways to connect friendship-wise and just to keep telling each other that we love each other, that we will walk through this. And God doesn't leave us alone. In those dark periods, He's doing something. We just have to look for it. And you find when you come out the other side that your marriage is actually strengthened. There's been not only the car accident, there's been a lot of sickness. A lot of sickness.
I think that's the reason why she married a nurse.
Yeah.
So I can look
Who
after
knew?
her. And
But yeah, there's been extended periods where I've been in bed for 6 months. And so not only where, you know, Brett has been fantastic the way he has handled it, but also our boys. They've learnt empathy, they've learnt compassion, they've learnt love, regardless of what's going on. And so they would come and lie on my bed, and we built such close relationships. So we would chat and talk, and my musician son would bring his guitar and he would play music. And, you know, if I was feeling low, he'd sit at the piano and he'd play me love songs, you know, from God. I'm going to cry now.
it's not far from the tear ducts from when Kate starts speaking that she starts getting weepy, so don't be surprised.
It can be overwhelming, God's goodness. And not only God's goodness, but to see it in your children, that God is doing a work in them where they can be compassionate and loving. And they don't see you as a burden. They just see this as a part of life. You know, things happen in life, but God is walking through that with us. And so they've been able to see that God doesn't leave us, and it doesn't need to damage your relationship when you're walking through tough stuff. It can actually strengthen it. And so they've been able to see all of that, and we're so grateful that even through tough times, our marriage is very close. God has remained firm, and we're the best of friends and the best of friends with our kids, which is extraordinary to have that privilege. We're parents first, friends second. They've got friends. But as a result of the way we've walked through life together, we are now good friends and we do a lot of things together. And the photo you saw, we had just been to Pixar. The Melbourne Symphony Orchestra had just done a thing on Pixar, and they had, when it was advertised, they also...
Pixar, the Toy Story and Bug's Life and...
Yeah, all those kids' movies.
We went together.
And the boys, when it came out, the boys said, let's all go together. You know, that's the first thing they said, let's go together. Let's, you know, go out for lunch. So we went out and we had the best time. And we do a lot of things together, and that's because we've built that relationship through the difficult times and through the good times. And it really strengthens you.
Because if you base your circumstances, the success of your relationships on everything going well, it's not a firm
flawed.
foundation. And we see that time and time again, especially young people basing physical intimacy as their basis of their relationship, and they don't have that emotional stability in their relationship. And that's the reason why we don't see relationships lasting, and they're only, you know, as I said, 12 and a half years, which is unfortunate. And we find that, you know, just financial circumstances, family circumstances. There's lots of times when the romance is high and then there's the troughs and peaks and troughs and peaks and troughs. And we have to ride those waves. And most important thing is having God in our centre as well as our friendship. We've never got running out of time, but very mindful of the time that we have with you, and hopefully you find this helpful. But one of the things that we've found, and we're going to share at the end, 4 tips that I'm going to guarantee that if you put those 4 things into practice, into your relationship, it will improve the health and well-being of your marriage. Guaranteed. If you did it all for a week, your relationship in your marriage will improve wholeheartedly. But one of the things that we find that is, we have to guard the idea that, and go in with the idea that no relationship is going to be perfect, and no relationship is beyond temptation. We are all one click away, which I could talk about in other ways, from looking at images that are inappropriate. We're all one click away from contacting somebody that we long lost love, and that's where affairs start. Not many people go into a relationship going, you know what, I'm going to start an affair today. They don't go in with that idea. It's those subtle things that we lower our guards down, and we allow the enemy to get into our world and our thought life and our brains and our minds, and we start contemplating different things. So you have to guard your relationship with your spouse, and it's you and I. We are a team. We are united. We are a force to be reckoned with, and nothing's going to mess that up. But unfortunately, we see people who, relationships are disposable. We see families are disposable. But that's not how God wants us. God wants us to stay together and be very vigilant with our minds and our hearts.
There's a few things that in the Christian world too, really important that we don't share deeply with someone of the opposite sex. It's not helpful. You create a bond. So if you've got an issue with something and it's personal, then you need to go to someone of the same sex. This is where a lot of pastors have come to grief because they've counselled women or vice versa, and they're not accountable and they fall. Now, they didn't go into it saying, I'm going to start an affair, but once you start sharing on a very personal, deep level, and there might be issues even in your own marriage, you've created a connection, and it's very, very dangerous. Right now, one of my sons, he's got friends that are married, and a couple of them are going through difficult times, and one of the girls had shared with him, and I said, no, enough. You are not to go into that any further. And I said, because you do not know if she will form a bond with you. And because he's a very listening person, and I said she needs to go and speak to someone. If she wants to speak to someone, I'm available, or I can recommend someone. But I said you are not to go into that with her, because I said it can create a real problem. And it's really important that we set our marriages and our kids up to succeed. If we put those kind of things in place, we set ourselves to succeed. If we step over those boundaries, we set ourselves up to fail. Even if we don't mean to, we still do. Yeah. Because we're human. We're human. And, everyone craves a deep connection, but if there's a problem in your marriage or relationship, it needs to be fixed with someone with the opposite sex. Oh, sorry, someone of the same sex. Not someone of the opposite sex.
That's an oath. But all I'm saying is you have to guard the idea, your heart and mind, and say, it could happen to me. What can I put in place? And that could be with your eye gate and as well as your ear gate, but also just the fact is, the way that you respond to different things, and watching your tongue, watching your anger, guarding those type of things. Because when you have tension, when you have anger or resentment, or even just a subtle thing, I wish you were more like, fill in the blanks, and you compare yourself to other people and what's happening in other people's houses, what's happening in other people's bedrooms, you have to guard your mind and heart from getting into those things. Because obviously the verse is, above all else, guard your heart, for everything flows from our heart. It's the wellspring of life, and we need to guard our hearts. Really, really important. One of the things that we've found, and I said before, is I like doing things for my family. I like serving them. I think as a nurse, we were serving the people. As a pastor, we're serving all the time. And now at Focus, I'm serving people. I listen to people. I get a lot of pastoral cares. And that could be just, I am just wired that way. But not everyone's wired that way. But that, again, you have to be intentional and do it from an attitude of, I'm doing this for others, not to get your, I'm feeling okay, this is me, look at me, I'm doing all these wonderful things. That's a wrong motivation. We have to guard our way we serve and do it with all humility. And we are united when we talk about some parenting things tomorrow, about we're really united when we teamwork when parenting, and we never want to have the one being the good cop, the other one being the bad cop. We're united as a couple, united as parents. But we also have to make sure that we, when we do things together, cherish them. Don't take them for granted. And serving together. And I love this. And because Kate's been unwell for so long, this is a treat for me to do life and ministry together. It just makes my day. In fact, she used to come into the office every now and then, but it was too quiet for her, because we're focused at Focus. So I used to go and I was sharing it a little bit earlier, I used to go in and throw a little ping pong ball at her head, just to make it fun. But she didn't like it. I don't know why. But I love doing things together and sharing it from a male and a female's perspective. But when we serve, we do it out of an attitude, not to get something. And I know men can do this, and I saw this a TV video clip of this guy who was cleaned the whole house. He cleaned the bathroom, the mirrors, the windows, vacuumed. He cooked dinner, and he was thinking he was going to get lucky that night. And she came home, and she was all over him, and he's going in his mind, this is awesome. And then she says, thanks very much for this, after he'd all kissed and hugged her, and then left. And he's gone, well, what about me? Because he had an attitude, an expectation that he was giving all this stuff to get something in return. We have to change our attitude when it comes to these type of things. What's your motive? What's your attitude? I'll talk a little bit more about this, I think, on Sunday when we're talking about conflict resolution, but the importance of forgiving. And you can't always forget. There's some things, there'll always be a scar, but forgiveness is a really important thing. And that's especially when you're having, when you've goofed. Own it and apologize for it, acknowledge it, and then you can move on. But sometimes, because we're different, I want to fix the conflict straight away. Kate needs some space, and that's always been a bit of a tension. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it has. I'm very mindful that if we try and fix it in the moment, that words will come out that you don't really want to say. If you try and do something when you're angry and you spew out exactly what you're really thinking, it's going to do a lot of damage. So for me, I will actually say, look, I'm going to go for a walk. I will come back. I just want to go and think about it and pray about it. Because everything looks a little bit different when you've had half an hour away and you've gone, okay, well, what bit do I need to own? What bit does he need to own? Where was I really angry at him, or was the situation blown out of proportion? And I pray about it. That way, when I come back, it's a very different discussion than the one that would have happened if I had stayed in that place.
But I want to fix it straight away.
And so
Does anyone else like that? Does anyone like to fix it straight away? I want to hug her. Because I said, I'm sorry. Now, can we hug?
So he wants to kiss and hug, so I give him a quick kiss and walk out the door and say, I'll be back in a minute. Hold that thought. But yeah, we need to understand that it's not a punishment. Like I said, you need to explain, I'm not just walking out on you. So right back when, I did need to say, I'm not walking away from the situation. I do want to discuss it, but give me some space. You don't just walk off and slam the door. That sends a whole other message. So we had to talk about that this is what I needed to do before we were discussing, rather than just taking off.
I once chased her to our lake where we live.
to where I walk.
She drove there, so I drove and found her halfway around the lake.
That didn't go so well.
No, it didn't go well. All I'm saying, guys, is just give space. Or it could be the other person, give some space. But we'll talk about this on conflict and taking the sting out of the battle and things like that. So this is the fun one, and I'm not going to go into the anatomical and the intimacy that everyone has, and there's lots of different varieties of being intimate, but we've found that, you know, being kind and considerate and compassionate. And I remember, I think I may have written an article on this, that foreplay starts in the kitchen. Sounds like me. And I remember I was trying to be, well...
Amorous.
Yeah, and this is G-rated, all right, it's G-rated. All the boys are in their rooms, and I was trying to give my wife a cuddle and a kiss, and she calls me Mr. Octopus, all right? Is that right? Mm. Yes. Mm. Anyway, I was trying to, you know, woo her, and she's backing off, and then we see our son videoing us.
Yes, so he was videoing us while we were kissing in the kitchen, and the next thing we know, it's on Facebook, saying Mum and Dad getting hot and heavy in the kitchen.
We got a few likes.
We got a few likes, but it was lovely because, well, it wasn't lovely that was out there, but I mean, it was lovely that, you know, married couples were getting hot and heavy. You know, it's nice. But he came and he sat down at our bench and he said, I love it that you love each other so much. And he said, it makes me secure. It makes me feel safe. This was a 22-year-old. He said, it is just so lovely when we watch you like that because it's safe and there's no doubts, you know, that our house is in a happy place. And it's interesting because when we talk about parenting, you know, we will talk about the greatest gift we can give our children is to love each other. Because of so many reasons, which Brett will discuss tomorrow, but it is really important. But, you know, it's funny because Brett did we were doing a discussion on intimacy on the radio. And it was
It's a bad move when you share some of your own stories on radio because lots of people hear them.
And it was on at 11 o'clock at night. Who knew that anyone listened to the radio at 11 o'clock? Well, yes, our eldest son's friends. So they started a discussion on foreplay in the kitchen.
Discussion group.
A discussion
and I
group.
Quote, Brett Ryan, CEO of Focus on the Family, says, get hot and heavy in the kitchen.
And lingerie is
the gift that keeps on giving.
And a few other bits and pieces that now the friends were all discussing and that, you know, come to our house. So I'm just like, oh, God.
And when they come over, anytime I'm in the kitchen, they get the giggles.
It's very funny, but it is important. It is important to still demonstrate our love for each other. And, you know, those small things like kissing in the kitchen or whatever, they are important as they are all parts of just demonstrating love and intimacy.
One of the things that I saw this picture, and I'll show it in a few moments, about how important it is, the differences between men and women. And, you know, that for guys, we're pretty simple creatures. We can turn it on any time. Whereas women have a bit more complicated. So I think this is a machine that demonstrates the difference between men and women about intimacy. And there's certain numbers of knobs and things you have to put in the right order. And just when you think you've got the right code, it changes. And even the women don't understand their code because something that works last time doesn't work the next time. And they don't have no idea how to get it back. So it's very confusing. And that's the reason why, going back to that idea about communication is really, really important to understand what's going on and what's going on in their heads and sharing and enjoying things, which is the last part that we would like to share with this before I get to the four tips that will be the game changers for your marriage. One of the things is we've shared is obviously there's been times, some great times, and there's some times that have been not so great, but we've found enjoying each other's company and having a good laugh and enjoying each other's company. Simple things. We love laughing. When was the last time you had a good gut-wrenching laugh together? You know, those things, because a cheery heart is a good medicine. It's a good medicine. And there's a lot of times, even when I was nursing, I used to make my patients laugh just to change their way that their brain was thinking. Their endorphins would be released, the good, happy things. You know, when kids were having to have an injection, I used to say, "Achiwawa, achiwawa, achiwawa." And I got them to repeat it 3 times really quickly. And while they were doing it, I gave them the injection, so I was still going, "Achiwawa, achiwawa, achiwawa." And then I said, "Oh, I've actually given you the injection." And they go, "No, you didn't." I said, "I actually have, because of the distraction." And sometimes, despite the circumstances, despite the things going on, laughter is a good distraction for the circumstances, because we live in a very, fragmented world, and sickness and injuries take place, and there's going to be times for romance, and there's going to be times for just routine and the mundane type of things. But amongst all of that, we always have time for laughter. Games. Watching a movie together that's, you both love together and laugh together. And doing things together. We do lots of things together, and our boys have watched that, but we just like doing things together. Kate doesn't like shopping, which is a great relief to me. But when she wants to go, I want to go with her. I'm not a fan of shopping per se, but I'll just go and mooch with her, just to mooch, so we can hold hands. And, but I find that sometimes, because my boys are now very demonstrative as well, when we go shopping, they want to hold her hand or put their arm around her, and they're all over her, all 3 of them in some state, all over, and I'm carrying the bags behind.
They were a bit younger than they were now, but I still go out on dates with my boys. They still take me, we go out and we have brunch together, or, we hang out, we play frisbee golf as a family. I've got scratches to show it all up my legs. But we go and do stuff together and hang out and laugh. Laughter is a big thing in our home. We follow
also
comedians
go on
and
date nights as well.
yeah.
Going on a date night, and I mean, it's one of the greatest things you can have. But sometimes people think, well, I can't afford to go out on dates. We went dates on our couch. Our boys were sent to their rooms, and we would have our couch time, holding each other's hands, hearing each other's stories.
Picnic.
We've had picnics in our house, inside and out. We've just done fun things together. It's those little things, the 1%ers. And I'm going to be sharing some few 1%ers that will make all the difference with your marriage. And this is the last slide. This idea of maximising the moments. It's those 1%ers. So each one of you has 4 of these moments every day, and you need to make the most of them. One is when someone leaves for the day. Someone's going to leave first, and I read this in Google, because everything on the internet is accurate, and it said, if your wife kisses you for longer than 10 seconds, you'll get to work more safely, you're more likely to get a pay rise, and get a promotion. All because of a kiss. It's a big difference. Yeah. But one of the things we've found is that you need to leave on good terms. Leave on good terms. I had a friend of mine who's a pastor, and he said he's done weddings for people, and he's also done a funeral for people. And the last words that were said when someone left was in anger and in frustration, slamming the door, and in their frustration, they lost control of the vehicle, and they crashed and were killed. Could you imagine the last words that were shared on this earth were said in anger and in frustration? So we've actually made a point that any time we leave, I always leave on good terms. And we always say the words, I love you, have a great day, look forward to when you come home, and you have to always kiss, all right? And our boys have now got this in their brains.
Yeah, so they will kiss me before they go. They will always say, I love you. And it's funny because one of our boys left, did not say goodbye, did not give me a kiss. And he got part way up the road and he drove back Because when they were little, I said, if you don't kiss the mama bear, you're going to have a bad day. Anyway, I went to work and
This is what he did. He did a U-turn, came in the driveway, left the car running, ran inside, kissed their mother, and said, I didn't want to have a bad day, hopped in the car and left.
However, I went to work and I did not kiss. And I get a text, looking forward to hearing about your bad day. You left without kissing me. And I went, oh, I'm sending you one through text. Not the same. So it was very funny. So we've kind of got this funny thing going, but we always kiss and we always say goodbye and we always say I love you. Really important that we do it not just because what if something happened. We do it because we show interest in their day, we show interest in them, and we show respect. And so it's out of respect. They text me when they're leaving a place to come home.
We're not doing that yet. Next month.
Okay, go.
Do that.
During the day.
During the day. When I go away on trips and go away, I always try and think of my wife. Somewhere along the line, I'm going to be thinking about her, and it's not uncommon for me to ring her while I'm on a trip, and it's great that she's here because I don't have to ring her. But I would ring her about 4 or 5 times, even if it's just sort of just to say, what's happening? And nothing's happened in the last half an hour that I've rung her, but I just ring her. But I've been role model of that. My father rang my mother for 45 years at 12 o'clock on the dot every day of his working life. He just did that. That was intuitively. And I don't ring my wife at 12 o'clock, but that's what he did. And sometimes it might be a 30-second conversation, maybe it might have been a 5-second conversation or a 5-minute. Whatever it was, he always did it. And it actually reminded me about this importance of during the day. And now we've got modern technology. It could be just a text. I'm thinking of you. How did the meeting go? Just those little things actually affair-proof your marriage because you're thinking of your spouse, not anyone else. It's those little things. And when I go away on trips, I always leave a note on a mirror somewhere or in her bed or somewhere along the line. It's just a little thing that we've always had, leaving notes. And then she will leave notes in my bags and things like that. But we've done the same thing with our boys. In fact, when our boys went on camps, we used to leave little notes in their underpants or in their socks or in their, actually I think it was probably quality assurance just to make sure they did change their underpants or change their socks. But those little notes, in fact, our 18-year-old son has kept every one of his notes that we've given to him in every camp that he's ever gone on. Every one of them. Just because it was such a precious thing. Those little things, those 1%ers, and I can guarantee that's an important thing. If you do that to your spouse, those little notes in their lunchbox, in their briefcase, maybe it might be a cheeky thing. It might be saying you might get lucky tonight, and I love those notes. Well, who wouldn't really? But those during the day things are really, really important. And then we come... Sorry?
Just wait, can I do in the day? So he will always ring me before he leaves work and says, is there anything you need me to pick up on the way home? That is now translated into my boys. So when they leave work or they leave uni, they will ring me. Is there anything you need me to pick up, Mum? Role modelling is so important because I did not say to them that they need to do that. It's because Brett has done it and he has role modelled it.
Now, I have to admit, sometimes I ring my wife up and say, is there anything that you want at the shops? And I'm actually thinking deep down, I'm going, I hope she says nothing, I hope she says nothing. And then she goes, can you go and get bread and milk? I'm going, no!
Haven't any of the 3 other boys rung and offered? But it's those little things. And each time they ring me, I go, oh, that is so thoughtful. It really touches me because of my health too, not being able to get out to shop. They all have done food shopping for me. They will do food shopping on the way home from wherever they've been, and they just say, shoot me a text with all the shopping that you need me to do. It's all just part of being a team. That's one of the things we have really focused on, but sport being a big thing in our family, but being a team. If one's down, everybody else is in. Nobody falls and there's a gap. It's like everybody closes ranks. And it's really important that families feel like they're a united front together.
And that's the reason when I was talking about being vigilant and being and treating each other with value and respect. It's those little things. It's the courtesy. Just saying, I'm going to be 5 minutes late. I'm just letting you know, or I'm 20 minutes late. The meeting went longer than anticipated. It's those little things. Just to let your spouse know, for whoever's the one at home at the time, is aware of what's going on. We shouldn't take it for granted that, I'll let them know when I get home. But they might have been preparing something or an expectation, what have you. The final thing is on this aspect of letting them know you're coming home. But when you get home, we've actually, we make it a beeline. When the boys were little, they would come on running out to me and want to greet me. But I would always go and I say, boys, I'm here for you. I'll give you a little cuddle, but I'm going to kiss your mother. I'm going to kiss my wife. She's the most important person. And so I'd make a beeline for her, and we give a hug and a kiss. And we would be excited for one another. The home is better because the other person has arrived. And I know this is going to be a bit transparent, but I used to, when Kate came home from her work or her day, I used to give a little dance.
You used to come out to the car and do a dance.
It was just little things. It's those little fun things, the traditions that we have in our household. And Kate's dancing is not really, really good.
Not up to snuff.
She's tried. It's not as good.
No, it's not as good. But our home stops. When somebody comes home, anybody, it stops. So if somebody's watching a movie, or if someone's got music on, or if someone's cooking or whatever, it stops. We pause, Dad's home, or Taylor's home, or whoever it is coming home, they're home. They walk through the door. How was your day? So glad you're home. The house is so much better because you're here. Everybody's where they should be. What's happened in your day? Now, it might only be a 3-minute scenario, and then everyone kind of pops back to what they were doing. But the person who comes home knows that they're special. And, someone might have had a really crappy day at work, but they know that they're always going to go home and they're special. Somebody is going to be there to go, this is so much better now you're here. And we just love it when someone comes home. And when everyone's kind of coming in at once, it's like everything stops and we all kind of hang around the bench and chat about the day and what went on. And traditions like those just make people feel special and respected.
And the returning aspect is that respect, as Kate was sharing. And I mentioned to some this morning about the fact is that the dog shouldn't be the most excited person to see you at home. All right? I think we as humans, we need to show much more value and excitement, not just the dog because you're going to be fed or gone on a walk. It's because the other person is there for them. And finally, this final, the tip that I'd leave you, and I can guarantee if you started doing these things when you leave and kissing and showing respect for one another during the day and thinking about them and when you're coming home, but finally, you'll all go to sleep at one stage. And going to sleep is one of those times when you can download, you're going to sleep, and ideally going to sleep at the same time, and that's been difficult because Kate often went to bed so much earlier, but we would make sure when we're going to sleep is to either hold hands, say I love you, you can never say it enough, and maybe, we don't do it all the time, but probably a good majority is how can we pray for you, or praying together. And those things, that spiritual connection, that intimacy, has actually strengthened and kept the spark of our relationship, despite the pitfalls and the frustrations and illnesses and injuries and all those type of things. All these combines to keeping the spark alive. And I think, I encourage you, do all these four for 1 week, and I can guarantee, and you did it with not something to get in return, but you did it because you wanted to do it, it will improve the health and well-being of your relationship between your spouse. But if you've got kids at home, they'll watch and observe, and you're setting them up for success. I've got a few, I don't know what the time is, and it's getting a little bit darker, I know. But I hope and trust that as what we've shared with you today has been of some help. And it's not rocket science. It's definitely not rocket science. But it is something that we all have to work on to keep the romance, to keep the spark, to keep the intentionality of our relationships as paramount and really important. because not only for the kids to be watching, but also you're going to be with this person, ideally, for the rest of your life. And it's better to work on these things. And I know we've got some people here who are probably married for 50 years and 60 years. Go and talk to them. See what they have done. Ask them. Glean from them. Glean from them what they have worked on. What are their highs and what are their lows? And learn from one another, because we don't do community on our own. We're not meant to do life alone. Let me pray for you. Father God, I just thank you so much for the men and women here represented, for those who have been married for many years, those who have been married for a short time, maybe those who may want to get married in the future, and maybe those who may unfortunately have drifted, their relationship has strained or has ended, unfortunately. But Lord, I pray that the things that Kate and I have shared, I pray that we do this to give you glory in everything that we do. And I pray, Lord, for those who are going through a hard time right now, that they will find the right support and the right people to come alongside them to counsel and support them and advise them where they're going through. And we know that you're a miracle-working God, and I pray that nothing is impossible for you, and intervene where it needs to be intervened. But for those who've got healthy marriages, I pray for even better and bigger things for them, their relationship, for now and in the future. We give you all the praise and all the glory in Jesus' most wonderful name. Amen. Now, happy to